from InfoWars. Um, we have Hugo de Garis that we're flying in from China. De Garis is one of the leading minds in the field of artificial brains and artificial intelligence. And we're flying him in from China to speak at our conference. And we have a host of other guest speakers as well lined up for this year's conference. It's going to be taking place from the 14th through the 16th of September. And we're really looking forward to it. And we've been in contact with a lot of the leading transhumanist people, and we're gearing up to tackle this topic at the conference this year.
And I just would like to say that I would encourage anybody and everybody, if they could, to attend this conference. And I believe, and this is just all fluff aside, because I don't just puff something to puff something, I believe that this is the most important topic of our generation and of our time, because it actually, the extinction of the human race is actually involved. And I would like to ask, I got so many things that I want to ask you, but to begin with, I would like to ask you about biohacking. That this ability now, and this is just, I mean, this disturbs me to the nth degree, and I think it should disturb us all, that now for less than $1,000, that people can buy a kit that they can use to alter their DNA, the DNA of their children, and the DNA of their pets. But just tell us what is going on with this new phenomena of biohacking.
Well, there's a growing movement of biohackers who are setting up high-tech, do-it-yourself biolabs in the basements, kitchens, and garages of their homes to modify the human genome, as you said, for less than $1,000. They're obtaining these kits. These kits are CRISPR-Cas9 kits. CRISPR-Cas9 is a technology that enables the modification of specific gene sequences. And it is revolutionizing genetic engineering. And so these biohackers they're citizen scientists. A lot of these individuals are younger guys. They don't have degrees in biology or biotechnology. They simply have decided that they want to learn to use CRISPR-Cas9 technology to modify their pets. In some cases, they want to make new kinds of beer. They want to modify different kinds of bacteria to experiment, and in the most extreme cases, they're actually already modifying their own DNA using CRISPR-Cas9 technology. The goal of the biohackers is to take gene editing technology, to liberate gene editing technology, genetic modification from the governmental and corporate labs, and to make that technology available to the layperson who wants to modify their own DNA, or who wants to modify the DNA of their dog or their cat or whatever their pet may be. And again, this is already happening. People are curing their pets of genetic diseases right now. People are curing, and they're doing it also as they're starting small businesses. They're using this technology to cure genetic diseases in animals that in many cases the veterinarians and even scientists working in the corporate labs have not been able to achieve. And it's very simple. This is the crowdsourcing of genetic engineering is what biohacking is. And so these individuals are able to use the same technology that's being used in the major universities and in the government labs. DARPA's using the same technology. But these guys are able to do it without the red tape, without having to get their project proposal passed by the school board or to get the funding for it through the military channels. These guys simply buy the kits themselves and begin experimentation. And they're syncing up with other biohackers across the globe through the internet. That's why I call it the crowdsourcing of genetic engineering, and they're uploading their results. They're uploading their DNA mods, their modifications, and they're sharing the information. They're crowdsourcing genetic engineering so that genetic engineering, genetic modification, both of human and non-human creatures, is accelerating at a rapid pace. Again, not only in the university labs and the government labs, military labs, but in the basements, the garages, the living rooms of ordinary people, possibly your very neighbors.
Wow.
And this reality has really flown under the radar. The government of the United States is right now trying to co-opt the biohacking community because I think they've realized that Jack is out of the box and he's not going back in. It would be very difficult to regulate the biohackers at this point because CRISPR-Cas technology is so obtainable. And you can imagine a future in which biohackers are trafficking, are trading in their, are buying and selling their mods in a virtual marketplace or on the dark web. And in fact, I would suggest that this is already beginning to take place. Some of these individuals have already modified, for example, the muscle mass in their own bodies in one particular case. They have cured themselves of some genetic mutations that were inherited through their family line. They've been able to, in some cases, cure themselves of diabetes and so forth. And they're even doing more astounding things in their pets. More draconian, more radical experimentation is taking place with animals, with people's pets. And so we're moving along very, very rapidly in terms of the genetic engineering. And again, this is a field of genetic engineering, this biohacking movement, this biohacking revolution that it's quite unknown still. But as it catches on, as it moves forward, what you're going to have is, instead of individuals who have cancer or who have some other kind of genetic mutation going to their physician to take chemotherapy or to get some kind of gene therapy that's moving very slowly right now. Gene therapy technology is moving very slowly in the medical industry. They're going to go to their neighbor's house instead to have their biohacking neighbor create what's called personalized medicine for their specific genetic mutation, for their specific disease. In one sense, this is a positive phenomenon because, as you know, big pharma has been choking the life out of the medical industry and has been making it very difficult for people to get cured of cancer and of these other terminal diseases. Why? Because big pharma doesn't make medicine by curing people. It makes medicine by treating symptoms.
Right.
I'm sorry, it makes money by treating symptoms, not by curing people. It profits by treating symptoms rather than actually taking care of the underlying disease. Whereas biohackers are not looking to cure symptoms, they're not looking to alleviate symptoms, they're looking to cure the disease at its most fundamental level, which is a genetic level, which is in the genome. Because most diseases today are a result of, in fact, I would say that fundamentally all diseases are a result of genetic mutation, deleterious mutations in the genome, which the the best way to treat a mutation in the genome is using right now CRISPR-Cas9 technology to isolate that particular mutation and to replace it with a functioning gene.
Wow. Now, if someone would buy one of these $1,000 or less CRISPR-Cas9 sets, is it possible for them to do germline genetic modifications? In other words, to modify their genetics or their children's genetics in such a way that this is passed on through their children?
This is, of course, the great danger of genetic modification. Among the GRIN technologies, genetics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, the emergent technologies right now that are converging, which are going to have the most dynamic impact on the human race, the convergence of those four technologies. Among those four emergent technologies, genetic engineering is by far the most dangerous. Why? Precisely because of what you said, germline genetic engineering. Germline genetic engineering is the kind of genetic modification that becomes inheritable. In other words, if you make a genetic change on the embryonic level, that genetic change, that modification can then be inherited by subsequent generations. Now, regardless of what the function of that modification is, it can be something positive. You can eradicate a very common mutation that leads to Alzheimer's, for example. Or it could be something deleterious. You could have a genetic modification that makes people more inclined to be subservient to the government, as an example. It affects the brain in such a way that it creates passivity and subservience. That kind of a genetic modification could also be made to be inheritable through germline genetic engineering and could affect an entire generation in a very short period of time. Could effectively, germline genetic engineering, through the power of germline genetic engineering, we could modify the entire human race in the span of a couple of generations through procreation, if enough people were exposed to that modification. And so we're entering exceedingly dangerous territory. And many people have been warning about it. There's many people who have been raising the red flag in the background, in the scientific communities, in the government, concerning the dangers of genetic engineering. In the past decade, in the last 10 years, we've been tinkering with genetic engineering. We've been trying to understand how the genome works, trying to map the genome to have an understanding of what genes control what functions. Well, we have a long way to go in understanding the totality of the function of the genome, but we're far enough along at this point to be able to make some very drastic modifications. I mean, we can right now, we have the technology right now to modify an embryo and select the color of a baby's eyes, the tone of his skin, the color of his hair, the texture of his hair, his or her hair, the gender. Gender's a different thing. We can do that. We could do that a long time ago. But in terms of the genetic traits, those phenotypic traits can now be modified. Unquestionably can be modified. So the stage is already set for designer babies. So what we have developing right now is a consumer market. It's underground right now. We haven't really been exposed to it yet. It's like the foundations are being laid for a consumer market that traffics in genetic modifications, designer babies, and then also modifications that adults can take that will do things for them that only surgery could accomplish now. But of course, without surgery, this would be through genetic modification. So we're really entering into a very interesting time and a dangerous time very rapidly. And the scary thing is, and I think the big secret is right now, and this is why the government is trying to co-opt the biohacking community, not just the government, also big corporations, is because this thing could get out of hand very, very, very quickly.
Oh, yeah. And that's why, in all seriousness, when I said that this is the most important issue of our day, it absolutely is. What we're seeing is a convergence of technology that is posing the greatest threat to the human race since the giants walked the earth and were directly polluting the human genetics. And let me just throw out an imaginary scenario to you. Let's say that I live here in House A and I have a daughter, and my neighbor over here in House B, he has a son, and his son is involved in athletics, and he wants to help his son genetically. And he buys his $1,000 CRISPR kit to intensify the muscles in his son by altering his genetics. When his son marries my daughter, what kind of an effect is this going to have on the grandchildren? Is it going to produce grandchildren that have animal genetics, or is the possibility open for children being born from with not totally human? Is this what we're talking about?
If it's germline genetic modification, then the answer is yes.
And I
But there
mean,
are genetic modifications that will not that are not inheritable.
and this is just a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And I mean, this gives a whole new meaning to the church as the set apart, called out ecclesia, to understanding this issue. Because I mean, for the most part, and this is why I am very thankful that you're able to address it in this conference on this level, because there are many people that are going to be in evangelical churches that are not going to be aware and might even participate in this, because it's very easy to understand the motivation of a professional athlete with millions of dollars at stake wanting to enhance himself genetically. And it's just a nightmare scenario. And how many, and with this able to be done in a garage or a basement, how many of these genetically altered individuals can the human race sustain without totally polluting the human genome?
Well, again, that would depend on whether or not the genetic modifications are germline. But in terms of my children, for example, my four boys, competing in the future market, within 20 years, people are going to be implanting chips into their cerebral cortex to increase their cerebral capability. If your children or your grandchildren decide that they're not going to enhance, that they're not going to modify themselves either genetically or using some other kind of biotechnology, they will be greatly disadvantaged in the market. They'll be disadvantaged in the market, and they'll be disadvantaged on the football field or the soccer field or what have you. Enhancements are going to become the norm in the future. It is inevitable, and there's no way to stop it. It will happen. We're already discovering that some of these individuals who've lost their limbs either by fighting in the war in Afghanistan or through some other accident, that the artificial limbs, the cybernetic limbs that these individuals are being fitted with, are in some cases already outperforming the the natural limbs. Um, and these are individuals who don't really have a choice. I mean, they had their leg blown off or something, and they get fitted with a new pair of legs. And these are very rudimentary cybernetics that we're dealing with right now. Some of these things, some of these prosthetics are not electronic yet. Some of them are, but we're already getting a glimpse of the future. I mean, I believe in the future. There will be we're going to run into a problem in which athletes, for example, are going to want to cut their natural arm off in order to have a cybernetic arm attached, because it's going to be so much more powerful, so much more capable than their natural limb. We're already beginning to see this amongst people who have, as I said, who have some of these prosthetics, some of these more advanced prosthetics. Their capabilities are slowly, slightly being enhanced. Not only can they walk or run anymore again, they can walk better, they can run faster. They can. There's. I was listening to the radio the other day. There are certain individuals who lost their arm or their hand. They were avid climbers, and they thought their career or their hobby was over. But they've come to realize that their prosthetic hand or their prosthetic arm is actually much better than their natural hand when it comes to climbing or doing some of these things. So the future is enhancement. There's no question about it. Cybernetic enhancement, genetic enhancement, the biotechnologies that are coming online right now. They're coming online. They're being picked up in some of these underground movements, like the biohackers. They're being tweaked. They're being perfected. They're being prepared for the enhancement market. And make no mistake about it, that is a multi-billion-dollar market. And investors know it. Technology companies know it. Futurists know it. It is perhaps the greatest market the world has ever seen, and it has not yet come to maturity. But it is there. It's already being constructed beneath our feet. And there are so many different technologies that are going to allow for human enhancement. I believe that genetics is the most dangerous because of germline genetic engineering. But there's all kinds of technologies. When you talk about the green technologies, for example, nanotechnology. I mean, nanotechnology, I believe, is going to be standard in medical care in the future, because we're already projecting to develop machines that are the size of a cell, of a human cell, of a blood cell, for example, that we can insert into the human body. We can insert billions of these little, or at least millions of these little nano machines into the human body. And these nano machines, these nano blood cells, for example, will be able to go into the body and aid the body in the defense against viruses, bacteria, infection, and repair other cells and do surgery on individuals from within the body. And so you can just imagine, if you had a choice, if you had some kind of a cancer, some kind of a tumor that required a major surgery to remove, if your doctor said, well, we can do one of two things, let's say 20 years down the line, we can do one of two things. We can cut you open the old-fashioned way, and you'll have to recover, a 2-month recovery after the surgery, and you'll have to deal with the pain and so forth. Or we can insert the nanobots into your body to do the surgery from inside your body without ever having to cut you open. Which is, of course, it's a very powerful and beneficial advancement in medicine. However, think about all the ways that that could be used against you. These nanobots could be controlled and will be controlled through computer systems, all the ways that they can affect the way you think, the way you act, all of the psychological things that could be modified from within without anybody ever even really knowing. I mean, you can't see a blood cell, you can't see a nanobot either. That's nanotechnology. That's developing right alongside of the genetic technology. Throw in the artificial intelligence that can control, that would be able to control some of these technologies in the future. Throw in DARPA's development of super soldiers. I mean, it's this is the future. There's no stopping it. It is coming. It's already developing. My four boys are going to see these things. They may not see the full development of them, but they're going to see this enhancement market emerge, and they're going to have to make a fundamental decision where to cross the line, what kind of enhancements are acceptable and what kind of enhancements are not. And the problem is that in order to understand this very important issue, and it's a very complex issue, one must have a deep understanding of the gospel.
Yeah.
And it is the gospel that has been diluted, purposely so, in churches across the earth.
Yeah.
Specifically, the gospel has been diluted. All kinds of other things have been highlighted in the Bible, peripheral things over the years, and the gospel has fallen to the wayside. And so people do not understand the ramifications of what it means to lose the fundamental trademarks that make you human, for example. People have no idea of what that would imply, the implications that are in play here, the dynamics that are in play. And it takes an advanced, a mature understanding of the gospel to navigate the days that are coming. And again, unfortunately, the gospel has been diluted. And
Yep.
and again, purposely so. This was a strategic move on the adversary's part, knowing what was coming, knowing the direction that society was moving, the direction that he was steering human society toward, which is human enhancement. Ultimately, where this is going is what's called post-humanism. That's the end game. And again, this is not, I was on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory the other night and talking about this stuff. And I read some of the comments after the show it was posted on the internet on YouTube, and I was astounded at how people were so uninterested in this topic.
Yeah.
And the reason why it is so uninteresting to the secular person is because they do not understand the ramifications, the biblical ramifications that are involved in the transhumanist agenda and ultimately in post-humanism.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're doing nothing less than trying to. I'm getting a lot of feedback here. And what they're trying to do is to offer salvation without Jesus. They're wanting to get around the fact that we are born with a fallen human nature. They think that they can correct it without the cross. And the gentleman that you're bringing in from China for your conference, Hugo de Garius, if I'm not mistaken, is involved now in developing robotics for the Chinese government and working on an artificial human brain. And one of those technologies that's coming into this perfect storm in this convergence is the nanotechnology field. And they are saying that by the year 2030 that they can make not only an artificial human brain but an artificial human body. Are they actually thinking that at the point when a person dies that they can transfer their consciousness, their soul and their spirit into an artificial body? Is this where this thing is going?
That's exactly what they think they can do. I'm not so sure that they can accomplish that, but they're going to try. And really, you nailed it. What the objective here is? This is an end around the resurrection.
Yeah.
Is what this is. And it is humanity rejecting the rectification of the human condition, which is the cross of Jesus Christ, and attempting to create a new path, forge a new way to the objective of the resurrection, which is the restoration of the human race, which is returning us to the state that we were created to be, the original prototype of the human race, which is of course Adam, and which is now Christ. So that's exactly what they're doing. This is an end around the resurrection, and their goal is of course eternal life. They will say, if you read the transhumanist propaganda, they'll say that transhumanism, the goal of transhumanism is to improve the human condition. But they know full well that what they really mean is not to improve the human condition, but to modify the human condition. In other words, to transhumanism, the term transhumanism is, what it means is it is a transition between humanity and post-humanity. Being human and being post-human. It is the transitional period. That's why it's called trans-humanism. They're transitioning us, their goal, the desire is to transition themselves and also society at large out of the human condition and into a post-human condition. That's the objective. And there are many different schemes out there concerning how that might be accomplished. Nanotech bodies are, in my mind, a nanobody I think is a lot further off. But what we have at hand now is the genetic modification. That's here. And that's the first step, is the genetic modification. That's where this is going to begin and is beginning. The nanotechnology and all of that, I think, it's going to hit some. It's probably going to, in terms of creating a nanobody, in terms of creating an artificial body that human soul can inhabit, I think they're going to run into some problems there, because they're making an assumption. They're assuming that the totality of human consciousness is in the brain. I happen to think it's not. I think that the brain is a machine that the soul operates.
Right.
Just like the muscles in your body, the brain is controlling the operation of the muscles in your body. You are driving this car that is the human flesh, that is the human body, but you are not the body. And so, but the brain it's the computer that makes the body work. So if you shut the brain down, you have the mechanism, the body, the vehicle can no longer function. So the problem is, can the human soul, the human spirit, whatever you want to call it, can the human spirit inhabit another kind of body? I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that if that were to occur, that person would no longer be human. It would be something else. And I'm not sure that they can accomplish that, but as I said, maybe they have already. Now, having said that, let me say this. And this can get really complex really fast. So we're talking about a nanotech body, which is made of which would be made of nanoparticles. But then you can also talk about a robotic body. You can talk about some kind of a robot being created and then transferring your memories and all of your cerebral capacity into a machine, or uploading it to the internet or whatever. There's a lot of different ideas out there. I'm not sure that can be accomplished. However, what I do believe can be accomplished is transferring your soul or your spirit into another human body.
Wow.
That, I believe, can be accomplished, and I would go so far as to say is being accomplished. And that there's crossover here with the alien abduction phenomenon and some things that are happening there. So that is a very real potential, is to transfer the consciousness from one human being into the body of another human being. The question then arises: can two separate consciousnesses inhabit the same body? I mean, it's endless speculation, but believe me that the experiments are underway.
And I would agree with you that I believe it's impossible for the soul and spirit of a human being to pass into a machine. I think this is too big of a job for the evil one to accomplish. It's just like the rite of the homunculus and the moon child that Crowley wanted to bring forth a child possessed by a devil from birth without a human soul. They can't do that. That's more than their dark powers can accomplish. But is it possible? And just like Sophia the robot, which is another whole bizarre scenario that's actually been made a citizen of Saudi Arabia, would it be possible for a devil to possess one of these artificial or robotic bodies? Is the idea of a devil possessed machine or artificial human, is this just crazy, or is this coming within the realm of possibility?
15 years ago, I would have said no. But I was, I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to spin a yarn here for you for a couple of minutes. I was when I was living in Peru, I have a piece of property in the jungle, in the Amazon basin, in the high jungle. And at the time, I was very good friends with a pastor. His name was Wilman. His name is Wilman. And Wilman and I were often would go to this piece of property that I have, and we would fast. I shouldn't say often. We did it a few times. And one particular day, not while we were fasting, but while I was still in town with Wilman, I had the inclination that I was supposed to go up there to this piece of property and to my piece of property and fast. And I was supposed to be praying about Isaiah 61. And so I went over to my friend Wilman's house, and I sat down and I told my friend Wilman, I said, Wilman, I feel like, and Wilman, by the way, is a Peruvian pastor. And I said, Wilman, I feel like God is telling me to do something. And that's rather unusual for me. I don't like to say that I feel like God is telling me to do something unless I really, really, really feel like God is telling me to do something. And I told Wilman this, and Wilman preempted me. He said, the Lord is telling you to fast, to go up to your land and to fast concerning Isaiah 61 and Isaiah 62. He knew it. And I hadn't said this to anyone. I hadn't told anybody about this. And he said, furthermore, I'm going to go with you. I'm supposed to go with you. So I said, okay. So Wilman and I got our things together, and we went out to my land, which is quite isolated. You have to hike to it. And I built a hut there. And so we went out there, and for 3 days we were fasting. And I really don't like fasting. In consecutive days like that. I'm just not a very good faster. And so I was pretty perturbed by the third day, because nothing was really happening. There's, you always expect when you do something like this, some kind of burning bush experience, and usually that's not going to occur. You're probably just going to be really, really hungry for 3 days. And so I was rather disappointed after the third day, and I was praying that night. Wilma and I were praying that night, concerning this Isaiah 61, and what is it that we're supposed to, what is the information that we're supposed to glean here? And that's, of course, the verse that begins with the Spirit of the Sovereign God has anointed me, and it pertains to Christ, but I think it also pertains, it also extends to Christians, but it primarily pertains to Christ, Isaiah 61. And so on that final night, I went to sleep, and I had a dream. And I won't bore you with the details of the dream. The dream revolved around demonic possession. That's what the general theme of this dream was demonic possession. And there was a point in this dream in which I was at the house I grew up in Brook Park, Ohio, and I was in the backyard, and there was this young woman. These individuals, these young people, had called me to come and deal with this young woman. They didn't know what to do, so somehow I ended up getting involved, and I was there. And again, I'm cutting out a bunch of the details in this dream, in the beginning of this dream. And so there I am. I'm at the house I grew up in. I'm in the backyard, and there's this woman on her knees, frothing, writhing with demons. And in the next yard over, I'm in the backyard, and the next yard over, the backyard of my neighbor's house, there was a party going on. And this was it was some kind of a graduation party or something. There was, maybe 100 people over there, 50 to 100 people. It was a big party, and they were having a good time. And they were kind of all intrigued, and they were looking at this girl who was on her knees, writhing with demons. And I walked up to the girl, and I casted the demons out of this girl, and she was liberated. And of course, part of Isaiah 61 is to free the captives. So she was liberated from these demonic entities, and to my surprise, when she became free, these entities, there were multiple demons inhabiting this woman in this dream. They went over to the party next door, and it was like the man of Gadarenes, the legion, when Jesus cast out the demons. When Jesus cast out legion, they went into the pigs, and there was 2,000 pigs, and the pigs rushed into the ocean, off the cliff into the ocean. Well, it was kind of like that. The multitudes of demons went into these people, and then these people started writhing with demons, rolling around, foaming at the mouth, screaming. It was kind of terrifying. And I hopped over the fence in the dream, and I started casting the demons out of these people. And to make a very long story short, eventually, as I was casting the demons out of these people, I was sending the people away so that the demons wouldn't have anybody to inhabit. And at that point, the demons began to inhabit machines.
Wow.
And I couldn't understand it, even in the dream. I thought, this is bizarre. How does a demon inhabit a machine? Machines of various kinds. And I remember in the dream, I felt very impressed in the dream to take note of the fact that demons were inhabiting machines. And I thought it was bizarre. I would have said, absolutely not. I don't think demons can inhabit a machine. It just doesn't make any sense. It's too bizarre for my mind to even contemplate. But here in this dream, the demons are inhabiting these machines. And I was having to, as bizarre as it seems, cast the demons ultimately out of the machines. in the same way that I was casting them out of people. And so at the end of the dream, again, this is a bizarre dream. I was walking on the fence that divided the two yards, and there was somebody walking to my right, somebody walking to my left, and the person to my right looked up at me and said, "What was that?" Just totally astonished. What was that? And the person on my left, when I looked to the person on my left, it wasn't a person, it wasn't a normal human being, it was an angel. And the angel was shining and had bright blue eyes and pointed at me. And he said, "That was Isaiah 61.
Wow.
And I woke up from the dream immediately, and I literally just sat up. And I was on fire when I sat up. And the reverberation of those words was in my mind. That was Isaiah 61. And the first thing I began to think about when I got up that morning, I mean, it was it's one of those kind of dreams that just impacts you so profoundly that it stays with you for a very long time. All I could think about that morning was, what does it mean that demons were inhabiting machines? And I couldn't understand it. And it was a very profound dream. And I don't have those often, very rarely. Most of my dreams are nonsensical and mean nothing. But I do know when every now and again I'll get a dream and I know I have to pay attention because it doesn't happen often. And I think most people probably know what I'm talking about. And so I had to contemplate for weeks after that dream, what does it mean for demons to inhabit machines? Why? What am I supposed to? How does this fit with anything? I mean, I certainly wasn't expecting to be contemplating that after my trip into the jungle to my land with my friend Wilman. And it didn't. And it really sort of just. It just was sort of filed into the recess, into the corner recesses of my mind, until I started researching transhumanism some years ago, and realizing that they were purposely building. They wanted to build bodies that could be inhabited by a human consciousness, and of course. That caused me to wonder about other consciousnesses, other sentiences inhabiting what they've built for the intention of housing a human sentience. But what if instead what they're building, unintentionally, is a framework, a body into which other entities in which other entities can reside? So that was a very long answer to that question, but that's the best way that I can answer that question, because all we can do is speculate. But I would have to say that because of that experience, because of that dream, I'm inclined to say that yes, I do believe that demonic sentiences can inhabit machines. As bizarre as that sounds, I want to say no. Everything in me wants to say no, that's not possible. But again, because of that dream, I have to at least be open to that contingency, which is, of course, a frightening scenario.
Yeah, and that really bears witness with my spirit. I really believe that dream was from the Lord, that it is a prophetic dream, that is really a clarion call to us all, that the things that are coming down in the dark realm, they're taking things to levels and new paradigms that weren't even thinkable even a generation ago. But we are at the place where we can no longer be stagnant in our approach to our spiritual life, in our proclamation of the gospel, and in our strategies on spiritual warfare. We've got to be aggressive, because there's things coming at us on a regular basis that are just constantly escalating on the dark side, and it's nothing that God can't handle. Nothing here is taking God by surprise, but we have to be very focused on the gospel and the cross to make sure that our faith is there, that we not be swept away in these perilous times. And there's another, and we don't want anyone to be overwhelmed with gloom. We want people to be encouraged to understand God is in control. He isn't surprised about anything here, and he is going to take care of his people. But at the same time, it doesn't help anyone to ignore the reality of what is going on. And indeed, I do believe that this is the most important topic of our age. The very extinction or continuation of the human race depends upon the purity of the human gene pool and of just an absolute continuation of the human race. But there was something that Vladimir Putin said the other day, and I wouldn't want anyone to say this, let alone Vladimir Putin. But Mr. Putin pretty much said in so many words, in my opinion, that we are now involved in a global super soldier arms race. In other words, that right now, the nations of the world are consciously developing this kind of technology on a military level to create super soldier armies. And just like you talked about, how that children in the very near future, if they don't accept chips into their brain, they're not going to be able to compete at the higher levels for the best jobs and in the best schools. They're just not going to be able to do it without chipping themselves. And are we to that place now where the governments of the world are seriously engaged in a super soldier genetic arms race?
It was October of last year that Putin, while addressing a gathering of students, mentioned that there could be a danger arising soon in the earth if we're not careful of the creation of super soldiers. I believe that Putin knows. I think he said that because he knows all too well that we're already creating super soldiers. So is Russia. So is China. I mean, there's no question. There's no chance that we're not. Let's put it that way. We have to. If China's going to field super soldiers, if Russia's going to field super soldiers, then the United States must field super soldiers. It's the same dynamic as the development of the atomic bomb. As soon as the United States deployed the atomic bomb in Japan, it triggered an arms race. And so we know that China is already developing super soldiers. This we already know. They just cloned a monkey. So if they cloned a monkey in the light of day, what are the Chinese doing in the darkness of deep underground military bases?
Right.
They're cloning people. If you can clone a monkey, you can clone a person. End of story, period. It's done. And guess what? It's already been done. And that's just cloning. And furthermore, tying this back into what we we're just talking about, if you can clone me, can you clone me, kill this body, and transplant my consciousness into the new body? It's the same mechanisms. It's the same genome. Why not? I think you can. And that ties into the Super Soldier Project. I think that's precisely what they're doing. Imagine a soldier that is trained to perfection. A soldier that's been on the battlefield for 20 years, 10 to 20 years, with an incredible amount of knowledge, who is a fighting machine. Imagine if that asset, because that's what that person is to the government, to any government, that soldier's an asset, a military asset. And imagine that soldier dying or on his deathbed, and the government not wanting to lose that asset, so having a clone ready. So that when this body expires, we transfer the consciousness, we transfer the spirit, what have you, into the clone body. I I guarantee you, if they're not already doing that, they've already schemed that one up, especially in China, where the regulations are lax, if there are any regulations on this sort of thing when it comes to the government. The Chinese government does whatever it wants, and the people have to accept it. It's not like the government of the United States. Same thing in Russia. It's not like the government of the United States, where everything that they do here that they know that people won't like, they have to hide it. Over in China, they just do it because it doesn't matter if the people like it or not. It's inconsequential. So, but anyway, Putin actually said that we were going to create soldiers who could fight without fear, compassion, regret, or pain, and that this contingency might be worse than a nuclear bomb. That's what he said as he was addressing these
Wow.
students in October of 2017. And Putin knows full well that this contingency is already a reality. I mean, it is. We are, and I always say this, and I'm writing a book right now with this is why these things are, I repeat these things over and over and over, because even though I've written about these things and I'm writing about these things and I've talked about them, they're so remarkable. They're so astounding to my own brain that every time I say them, it's kind of like I'm shocked by the reality of what I'm saying, because it is a reality. There's something called the technological imperative. It's also known as the inevitability thesis. And I think I've said this on your show before, the technological imperative theorizes that once a useful technology is introduced into society, what follows inevitably is the development of that technology.
Right.
And it hasn't failed yet. As soon as a useful technology comes online, no matter what the potential consequences may be, that technology will be developed until its utility is fully exhausted. Again, the atomic bomb is probably the best example of this. At the height of the Cold War, the United States and Russia could each nation respectively could destroy the planet many times over, just with their own arsenal of nuclear weapons. And so, but yet that didn't stop us from developing more and more and amassing more and more nuclear weapons. I mean, what could be more catastrophic than nuclear war, large-scale nuclear war? Really nothing. I mean, if we would have engaged Russia in that war, we would not be sitting here today. We would have destroyed the earth. We would have rendered the earth useless because of radiation. So if we were willing to do that with the atomic bomb, and still are, then why in the world wouldn't we do that with super soldier technology? We would. We are, period. And so is China, so is Russia. Very likely, the United Kingdom is engaged in the development of super soldiers, and some of the other leading nations, probably Israel, probably South Africa, and France, and so forth. I mean, nobody wants to be outdone on the battlefield of the future. And the battlefield of the future is super soldiers, artificial intelligence, robots, and so on. And that, by the way, there's two things that drive the development of technology. There's two main drivers to the development of technology. One is military application. That's probably the biggest. Military application drives the development of technology, always. And then profit in the commercial realm. Military first, profit second. And so these things are going to be developed for both military application in secret until we're far enough down the road where everybody knows that we've got robots out there killing people, which we already do. But I mean, drones. A drone is effectively a robot that kills people. Right. And when those drones are controlled by strong artificial intelligence, when that artificial intelligence is actually making the decision whether or not to deploy a missile, that's a scary scenario, and one that that's a well-known situation that has been debated in the public arena. But what we'll never debate is the creation of a super soldier, because that's a black budget project. The creation of a super soldier, that's hidden in the black budget of the projects that are being developed in the United States. That's far beyond DARPA. That you get into Lockheed Martin, and you get into the deep underground bases when you talk about the development of super soldier technology. So this is it's astounding to me, even as we're talking about this, to realize that this is the world in which we now live. I mean, within how long did it take? I grew up on my generation, and again, I'm fond of saying this often on the radio, because this is the best way for me to process this information, and probably will be the best way for some of your audience to process this information. My generation was the last generation, I'm 34 years old, was the last generation to grow up without the internet and without cell phones. By the time I graduated high school, I didn't graduate high school, by the way, but by the time I would have been graduating from high school, the internet was off and running. Everybody had the internet now in their homes. I remember when I was a sophomore, I would say, or junior in high school, maybe even a freshman in high school, that my dad got the internet in our house for the first time. And and I know it was the same for my friends, because we all were kind of getting the internet at the same time. And I was, I don't remember 16 years old or so. And when the internet first came online, we weren't spending massive amounts of time in front of computers yet, and we weren't deriving most of our information yet from the internet. We had to be taught in school. I remember we had a computer class in high school to teach us how to use a search engine. And so my point is this. From that time, when I was 16 years old, 17, when I was in high school, to now, I'm 34, within a span of 15 years, look how much how drastically the internet has changed the world. That is going to be the same degree of change that we have witnessed with the development of information technology through the internet. That rapid pace of change is going to be evident in the realm of genetic engineering, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and robotics going forward, from this point forward. So my kids are going to look back and say, I remember when I was in high school and people were just starting to talk about having a family robot. And to the same degree, at the same rate of exponential growth that the internet changed the world, these other technologies are also going to change the world in the same way. Information technology came first, necessarily. It came first. But I can only imagine when my kids are 34, looking back at their lives now, looking back at the internet and Facebook, social media, that's information technology. They're going to be living in a world where robotics is developed to the same extent that information technology has been developed. It's going to catch up, in other words. Artificial intelligence is going to be and I'm talking strong artificial intelligence. Right now we have weak artificial intelligence. Google algorithms, that's weak artificial intelligence. But just wait for strong artificial intelligence. When strong artificial intelligence comes online, that's a whole nother dynamic. And I don't believe personally that artificial intelligence, that computers, that machines can gain consciousness. I don't believe that machines will be able to gain consciousness in the same way that we have consciousness. However, they will surpass the capacity of the human brain, for sure. Already have in some ways, but they're going to be making determinations that humans are making right now, concerning, for example, on the battlefield, who to kill, who not to kill. Is this a hostile? Is this a friendly? These are the kind of determinations that weak artificial intelligence is already making on the battlefield. So, and by the way, even now, the the weak artificial intelligence that is Google is already learning. It's learning right now. It's literally